Hey everyone, Chris Shipley here. Before we get started with this week's episode of Old Man Strength, I wanted to bring on an old friend of ours, George Trice from the Jack Trice Legacy Foundation. If you guys remember, and if you don't, you can go back and listen to episode 2.13 and learn about George's ties to Jack, his time at ISU, and how through the Legacy Foundation, he's trying to keep Jack's legacy intact and in remembrance. But today, I thought we'd bring on George and let's talk about the Jack Trice Legacy Foundation golf outing he's got going on August 6th. George, how are you doing today?
I'm good, Ship. Appreciate you having me on here.
Yeah, no problem, man. We'd love to have you on. It's good to catch up with you.
I know it's been a minute, but since last we've talked on video, I moved to Arizona, so I'm trying to stay cool. I mean, 104 today. I stayed inside, but I'm good. I'm good.
That's usually what happens. I lived in Phoenix for about 6 months when I was a freshman in high school, and it was absolutely brutal. Unfortunately, I moved there in January, showed up and went to school, had shorts on, pure white. Everybody's like, look at this loser. Where's this guy from? So I got branded pretty quick as an outsider.
Yeah, I mean, when it's 55 degrees and you're coming from somewhere where it's like probably 5, I did that when I moved to LA. It was December and everybody's wearing bubble coats and I'm wearing t-shirts and some shorts. Like, hey, this is summertime right now. So
that's right.
I get what you're talking about.
That's right. So Jack Trice Legacy Foundation Golf Tournament, August 6th. Tell us about it.
I'm trying to point at my QR code.
I see it.
Gonna be a video. I got a QR code there, and then I got a QR code there for the website. But no, we're having the second annual event. We had one last year. Good turnout. Had a lot of volunteers. Had about 10 teams participate. Raised about $3,000 for the Jack Trice Scholarship, and about $3,000 for the foundation. And so the second annual one is coming up on August 6th. Plan that date. I try to do better than doing it the Friday before the big game. Luckily, the Iowa State game's away. But I also didn't realize, since I don't live in Iowa, that it's tax-free weekend. So, people are going to be out shopping for school clothes for their kids and stuff like that. So, but they can do that after the tournament because it's an 8 o'clock shotgun start out in Adel at River Valley. Cy will be there to send us off. I will be presenting the $50,000 check to Cy. It was a fake check, but they'll get the drift. But giving Cy the check, kind of presenting that to Iowa State because of our donors, because of people that have donated to making the logo you see here, all the things that people have done for us from treasure and time. We hit 50,000, and that's the minimum amount to get a scholarship endowed. And so now we're going to be celebrating with this golf event, saying we did it. Let's have some fun. Now let's go on to the next milestone. And so that's what this event is about. This event now is more focused on what else can we do as the foundation, because now that we are starting to get Jack's legacy solidified at Iowa State from an academic standpoint, now we can branch out and kind of do other things to kind of keep his memory and legacy going.
Yeah, totally wanted to go to it last year. I had a buddy of mine that signed up and worked it for you, Joe Clement. So we're actually going to sign up. My wife just told me before I walked down there, she's like, why don't you sign me up too, and we'll just do it together. So we're definitely going to sign up and volunteer, and then we're bringing up a couple things for you to auction off, and you're going to have some of that stuff too, right? Some auction stuff that they can bid on.
Yes, and so if you go to Trice Legacy, if you look up Trice Legacy on Twitter, Instagram, or on Facebook, you'll see that we've been posting about this event. There's actually going to be an online auction this year. So everything is going to be digital. Anybody can participate, even if you're not there. We will send you your prize. There's some trips on there that have been donated. Minimum bids, some are Orlando trip for 4, starting at like $1,500. And so people have donated these events. There's been some memorabilia, some one-of-a-kind artwork, some one-of-a-kind different things that have been donated. And so August 1st, that will open live, and we'll announce that. But you can look up, see what you want, start placing bids, and we will close it at the end of the tournament so that people that are in person can win. If they've won, they can get their prize, and if not, we'll just again mail it off that Saturday or Sunday so that they can get their prize as well. So I appreciate you doing that. Shout out to Joel. Joel sent his information to his daughter. So his daughter, Emily, has recruited 7 other people from Mid-American. So Mid-American Energy has 8 people showing up to help us on that Saturday. So Nationwide, Principal, EMC, everybody, Mid-American is doing their thing. Can you get some people out there to beat Mid-American? I mean, I work for Nationwide, so they got to do something,
There you go. That's right. Well, I'm just super excited that things have grown so well for you, and the legacy that you're building. Tell us a little bit about, in case people haven't heard, what the Jack Trice Legacy Foundation is, and kind of what inspired you there.
So honestly, this started in 2020, right after the death of George Floyd, the murder of George Floyd. There were some Iowa Staters going and comparing that situation with the death of Jack Trice, and I got tagged in it. And so what they were saying, they were comparing their deaths of racially motivated, and that was really the end of it. And they kept going deeper and deeper into it. And I really got on there and said, hey, don't do that. Don't put those two in the same context. I said, wrong place, wrong time, bad outcome. Jack was doing his thing, playing football for a university. And because of his race, he was targeted, he wasn't accepted, and the injuries, ultimately it was his demise. And so when I heard that and I started looking at that, I decided that it was time for me to give back, because Iowa State does a great job of recognizing Jack from the athletic standpoint. There are a lot of people involved in that, from the 5 stripes, all the memorabilia, the committee that we're doing for the 100th year anniversary next year. A lot of that stuff is about the athletic department. And so what we're trying to do for the 100th anniversary, which is in 2023, and the foundation, is to go further than that and look at the academic aspect of what he wanted to do. Animal husbandry was his major. He wanted to go back down south and teach ex-slaves how to sharecrop. And so I've actually ran into, and this is going to sound weird, but I've actually made a connection with the bloodline, the original bloodline of Trice, down in Lexington, Tennessee. And they've invited me down to see a lot of what was down there. The plantation that Jack was born on, no longer there, but the land is still there. A tornado took it out. The cemetery where Trices are buried. So I'm doing a lot of research and digging, because I want to get this out of just Iowa and out of just the Cleveland area and go back down everywhere and get this out there. And so that's really what motivated me to do that. And I've been afforded some opportunities that others haven't, and it's my duty to pay it back and pay it forward. And so everything I do is on my spare time, outside of work, on the weekends, taken away from my kids, just to get this legacy, out in front. And the more that people can talk about it, the more that it can get broadcast around the country. ESPN, CBS, they did a good job during football season, but it's not just about football. And that's what I'm trying to do. And that's why my tagline is hashtag more than just football. It's about everything else that Jack was trying to do before his life was cut short. And so that's where the foundation comes in, because that gives us the opportunity and the medium to do the leadership programs and the development programs and the mentorship. Whereas we have just raised money for the scholarship, and that is a separate entity. And so that will always grow, whether people donate through Amazon, donate through United Way, donate through their corporate giving at their companies. They can donate in so many different ways to support Iowa State and that scholarship at Iowa State. But they also have the choice to just support the foundation. One of my big donors is an Iowa fan, and I'm going to say that, but he's Iowa. He can't stand Iowa State. He's one of those guys, but he likes me. He likes me. He's my friend. And when I told him what the foundation is trying to do and what the goal of the foundation is, and not just Iowa State, but to any HBCU, Ivy League, or trade school, he was all on board. He said, I'm here to help, because once we got this endowment, now we can go across the country. Now we can get big. And so that's what we're trying to do after 2 years, hitting $50,000. A couple key donors. I don't name my donors out there, but a couple key donors that helped us really get to this point. And I thank all of them for that.
Well, congratulations. We're certainly proud to be associated with you in a small way, and to help promote what we can with you. And I will see you on August 6th.
I'll see you on August 6th.
All right. Thanks for sticking with us, guys. We're going to bring up that next episode. But George, good luck, and we'll get you on, and maybe we'll wrap up before football season and see how it went and do some previews.
Hey, I like that. And also, I'm going to throw out a shameless plug. If you have not heard, one of my good friends, Reggie Hayward, inducted into the Hall of Fame.
That's right.
September 23rd, Baylor game. We're throwing a tailgate out there for him. Reggie got a lot of people, and they're all coming in from Chicago. I don't know what's going to happen in Ames, Iowa, but I'm going to be there. And hope everybody else is there to support him for the accomplishments that he did, because I will be representing him there as well.
All right. Sounds good.
All right.
All right. Thanks a lot, George.
Thank you.
Yep.
This Three Beards Media podcast is sponsored by Revelton Distilling Company. When Rob and Chrissy Taylor started following the Kentucky Bourbon Trail in 2012, they fell in love with not only bourbon, but the entire distilling process. Just 8 short years later, in 2020, Revelton Distilling Company was opened, offering an entire family of products including vodka, gin, whiskey, and Revelton Shine. Come visit the tasting room at 1400 West Clay Street in Osceola, Iowa, where you can sample one of their many spirits, including 4 gold medal winners. Can't make it to Osceola today? Not a problem, as you can pick some up at your local Hy-Vee or Fairway grocery stores. Follow Revelton Distilling on Twitter or Instagram at ReveltonDC or their website www.reveltondistilling.com.
This Three Beards Media podcast may contain mature themes, and if you're not down with that, we got 3 words for you. Like the podcast. Nailed it!
Would you like to sample some of my nuts?
Hello, and welcome back to yet again another edition of Old Man Strength, a podcast of Three Beards Media, and brought to you, by Revelton Distilling Company. We are very excited once again to chat with you guys to solve all of the world's problems. I am Tim Johnson, joined as always by Chris Shipley. Chris, how are we doing this evening?
Good. I was grimacing hard when you said we'd solve all the world's problems.
Well, there's probably only like 1 or 2 things wrong with the world right now.
Right. Yeah. And we're going to go over them tonight.
It does seem like things are pretty much under control, and there's not any amount of chaos out in the world whatsoever right now. Yeah, man, it's been crazy. Even the 4th was kind of a crazy holiday. I don't know if you were able to relax or enjoy or what. I do know that you actually participated in a parade this weekend.
I did. Three Beards Media did some promotion for our sponsors, Revelton Distilling Company, and our new sponsored segment sponsor, Wintrust Mortgage with Kyle Lehman. So we were able to do that. It was just an excuse for me to drive the convertible through a parade. That's what my wife said. She said, you're not fooling anybody. So, and then it, I don't know, became like 185 degrees out or whatever else. And then I think I laid around in the air conditioning the rest of the day.
Yeah, there was a point during the weekend where I thought, boy, I should really be outside. But then I thought that involved getting off the couch and putting on pants, and decided that neither of those things sounded like they were worth the effort. But I did get out and I took the daughter fishing and stuff like that. So that was fun. She had a great time with that. So yeah, absolutely. Well, great. Chris, I wanted to give you an opportunity to introduce our guest this evening.
Yeah, well, typically we joke around and say that, 2 old white males, got all the answers and and we're solving the world's problems. And it's usually tongue in cheek. But to be in all seriousness, I think that's part of the problem right now in this world is we don't have enough diverse conversations and bringing on people that sure as the hell know a lot more about certain subjects, like, you know, a woman's body and their right to make their own choices. I think there's too many old white males making those decisions now. So we thought we'd bring on somebody to straighten us up. So Stephanie
Is that
Copley.
why you brought me here?
Yeah, we're not talking sports tonight. I'm sorry.
Wait a second.
Steph, we just wanted you to fix white men.
Right.
We should probably be able.
Oh,
I mean,
hell.
like, this should be a pretty quick podcast. So I think we'd probably
We
be able
should
to
be
get
out
that
of
done.
here in about 10, 15 minutes.
Yeah,
That'd be fine.
exactly.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
I was brought here under false pretenses.
Yeah, I don't think you were.
I wasn't. You're right.
Steph, thanks for joining us. Of course, Steph, co-host of TitleIX Pod on Cyclone Fanatic, well-known Twitter verser, amazing mother and wife and lawyer, and just an overall good person. So,
Thank
Steph,
you.
thanks for
That's very
taking
kind.
time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I can be kind sometimes. I can be a nice guy
Once every week or so.
once every week or so. Right.
Yeah, well, I'm pumped to be here and to have a nice little fireside chat.
Yeah,
So-
absolutely.
So, Steph, for our listeners who might not be familiar, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit more about yourself beyond what Chris just said?
Okay,
like you can
so-
correct the record.
Correct the
as it
Right.
were.
Yeah.
Well, I guess for purposes of this conversation, I feel like saying what I'm not is probably important. So I guess I'm a lawyer. I am a lawyer. Chris was right about that. I'm a corporate counsel for a company here in Des Moines. And before that, I did workers' compensation law for about a decade. I was a lawyer practicing, and then I was an administrative law judge in workers' compensation. But I'm not a constitutional law scholar. I never practiced constitutional law. But the stuff we're going to talk about obviously involves a lot of constitutional issues. Because I'm a lawyer and I have the law school background, I think I can offer some additional insight into what some of the decisions of the last few weeks mean beyond what you're getting on Twitter, what you're seeing in headlines and snippets of the news. But I think more important than my profession is the fact that I am a woman. I'm a mom of 2 young girls, and I feel very passionately about a lot of these issues. And Chris knows this, but I was telling a friend, you know, I've been mad about laws before. I've been mad about court decisions before, but this is the first time I've been scared. And I recognized how privileged I am to say something like that, because people of color and people in the LGBTQ community have been living in fear for a much longer time than me. So I recognize that privilege, but I'm scared, I'm mad, I'm fired up, and that's why I'm here tonight. So I just wanted to kind of preface everything I say by saying I'm not someone who can answer every intricacy of the Constitution, but I feel like I have a decent framework to help people understand and at least provide my perspective and why I have the perspective I do.
And you know, there have been, it's not just the overturning of Roe versus
Right.
Wade and sending that back to the states. It's been a number of decisions here.
Yes.
It was not just one single thing that has happened in the last couple of weeks, and it
It's been a
feels like
wild couple of weeks.
the hits just keep coming, right?
Yeah.
For a people that have been very concerned about activist judges, it sure seems there have been some pretty precedent reversing and
Yes.
precedent setting decisions
Yeah.
that have been kind of shocking. I guess I shouldn't say shocking because they weren't expected from this court, but shocking just in the fact that it overturned literally decades of precedent.
Yeah, and just how far some of the decisions went. I was trying to think of a time in our lives when there's been a series of decisions come out this quickly that have felt this monumental, and I couldn't remember one. And I think part of it is now we have the rapid fire reaction on social media that didn't exist, decades ago. And so it might feel worse than it has in the past. And maybe there's a a session that I'm not thinking of where these decisions came out in such a rapid fire way, but this one certainly feels monumental. And for me, and you guys can tell me if you had a different experience, but the one that kind of started the dominoes falling came out June 21st. It was Carson v. McCain, which, or Macon, I guess is how I think you pronounce it, when the justices ruled 6-3 that Maine violated the Constitution when it refused to make public funding available for students to attend religious institutions or schools that were going to provide religious instruction. And that was kind of the first one that I was like, oh, here we go. And what happened was in some of the state's rural and sparsely populated areas, which we're familiar with here in Iowa, the school districts didn't have secondary schools. So they didn't have their own middle schools and high schools, and they were sending students to different districts, or they were paying tuition to the schools that the student chose. But the state of Maine was refusing to reimburse the tuition for religious schools. And Justice Roberts, who wrote the decision, said that's discrimination against religion. And he went on to say that it doesn't matter that the Maine program was intended to provide students with the equivalent of a free public education, which is, of course, secular. So that was the one that kind of started the dominoes falling that I think set forth this crazy couple of weeks of decisions.
That decision is probably low on the radar as far as a lot of people heard. I had not heard or wasn't even aware of that one until you started to speak about it tonight.
Yeah.
And I think that might be part of the problem in just how the media and how things are portrayed out there, because they would much Roe v. Wade to me, and maybe to the person that doesn't pay attention a lot, is the first one that is shocking for them. But to your point, there's a lot of other ones here that have happened down the pike that should have raised some flags to begin with.
So there's one more that actually came before Roe too. It's not, so the decision that overturned Roe was called Dobbs. So I'll try to refer to it as Dobbs going forward in this podcast. But before Dobbs, the day before Dobbs, it was New York State Rifle and Pistol Association v. Bruin, which again was a 6-3 decision, when the court ruled for the first time that the Constitution protects an individual's right to carry a handgun in public. And what they did in that decision was they struck down a licensing law that had required New Yorkers who want to carry a handgun in public to show a special need to defend themselves. So, for example, if someone had been receiving physical threats or, walked through an area in which he or she was harassed, the court said that law that required a special need to defend yourself to carry that public handgun in public was a violation of the Second Amendment's right to bear arms. And Justice Thomas wrote the decision, and he said that courts should only uphold state gun laws if there's a tradition of such law or regulation in U.S. history. And it's my understanding, and this is kind of the interesting part here, that the law that the New Yorkers were trying to enforce was enacted in the early 1900s. So if that's not, U.S. history, I'm not sure what will be.
Right.
And effectively, this decision makes it harder for states to regulate guns, because the regulation has to be, and this is in the decision, consistent with the historical understanding of the Second Amendment. It doesn't mean that states can't regulate guns. It just means that it has to be consistent with the historical understanding of the Second Amendment. I don't know what the historical understanding of the Second Amendment is anymore. No. I don't know if that means when the document was ratified in the 1780s. I don't know what that means. But it's, regardless of what that will eventually become, what that standard will become, it was a huge blow to people, the vast majority of Americans who want stricter gun control laws after what's been another devastating year, devastating month, devastating week of gun violence. So that one came the day before the Dobbs decision, and that one stung.
It seems to me, particularly, so when I look at Justice Thomas, who has spent the last 30 years as a conservative judge on the court, it seems like particularly in some of those early decisions, he was kind of signaling, now that he has Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett and kind of has more because even previously, I think some of the more conservative justices weren't so
Conservative.
correct,
Yeah.
right? And so it almost felt like in reading some of what he wrote in these decisions, it almost seemed like he was kind of winking to his base of now's the time. Is that a reasonable assessment from what it certainly seems to be? And I know I'm coming from a biased standpoint.
Me too. I mean, obviously, but that is how I feel. I mean, in all of these decisions that we'll talk about, like you said earlier, they are departures from precedent in a significant way. And I think that is what is maybe the most unnerving part of this is if we're suddenly taking this turn from precedent, what's next?
Mhm.
And the Dobbs decision is the scariest one in that regard. Although it makes you wonder, the case where they forced the main tax dollars to go towards religious institution. I mean, where's the line? So in a lot of these cases, the question becomes, well, where is the line? And I think that's the scary part. And I think you're absolutely right about that.
Well,
I mean,
if we're go ahead, Tim.
No, I was gonna say I think the part that becomes the challenge when you talk about a line. So I forgive me, I forget the case, but the football coach.
Yeah, the one that came a couple of days after Dobbs, Kennedy, the
Yes.
Bremerton School
Yes.
District. Yeah.
Right. So in Kennedy, I think I don't know that the justices necessarily understood that opened the doors to pagans, to Muslims, to right. Like it
Right.
opened the door to a lot of things that are antithetical to what I think their goal was in pushing so strongly for this particular outcome. And so I think in any number of these, there's kind of a double-edged sword on some of these.
Right. So, and it makes you wonder, the case we're talking about, it came a couple of days after Dobbs. It was a decision where the Supreme Court said a Washington State high school coach had the right to pray on the football field immediately after the game. And the school district had said, hey, coach, we understand what you're doing, but you can't do this. It's a violation of the Establishment Clause that says, a school can't establish a religion or endorse, a religious point of view. Coach said, hey, you're violating my First Amendment rights to speak freely about my religion. And you're right about that. It makes you wonder what would have been the outcome of this case had it been a Muslim prayer, or had it been a Muslim coach doing or a Hindu or something, anything other than Christianity. It really makes you wonder, would the court have even taken it at that point?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, in that case, I keep thinking about that case. This one I'm a little bit torn on because generally speaking, I feel like if you want to pray, do your thing. That is kind of my mantra through all of this. Is you do you, it's fine. But my issue is this is a high school football coach, okay? He's praying on the 50-yard line immediately after a game in a very public setting. And the court's majority said the prayer he was doing was not in his role as a coach. It was private speech after the game concluded. And that Coach Kennedy's prayers were not publicly broadcast. They were not recited to a captive audience, and that students were not required or expected to participate. My problem with this is that if you've ever been a kid, know the effect of peer pressure. My parents were both Catholic, but they chose not to raise me Catholic. I was not really raised religiously at all. But by the time I was in middle school and my friends are going to CCD and Wednesday night youth groups, I was suddenly like, well, what the hell is everybody else doing? And why am I not a part of it? And I felt this pressure to be involved in one of those things. And that had nothing to do with the coach praying. That was just my own internal pressure that I felt. So I can't, the suggestion that students aren't required or expected to participate, probably true. I'm sure he didn't say, get your ass over here, we're going to pray. But the implicit pressure on those kids is significant. And
But-
that's the part that
Right.
really freaks me out.
Well, the part that freaked me out is that there were students that came right out and said, and this was not necessarily testimony in court, but said that they were retaliated against for not
Yes,
participating.
right.
Yes.
Right. And so you can go ahead and say, and I agree, if a coach wants to pray after a game, that's fine. I don't think there's a clear enough delineation between his role as an agency of the state,
Right.
right? As an agent of the state, as someone who is an agent of the school, and not, as long as he is still providing instruction and guidance to his team, and as long as there could even be the interpretation that there might be consequences for not participation. I think that's where we just need to be clear, because again, had this been a practicing member of the Church of Satan
Right.
doing this exact same thing, would the court have even taken it up? And
That's my whole issue is, of course
Right.
they wouldn't have.
Right.
And, it's just these cases are so tricky because so much of it is the other part of it that bothers me about this case is so much of it is based exactly what you said on what kids are saying, what the coach is saying about when he did this. And I saw something in that case I've never seen before is in the dissent. They actually posted there's actually a photograph in the dissent of where he was praying, how many kids were around him, because in the majority they suggest, this is a private moment with himself and his whoever he's praying to. Well, clearly that was not the case. This was a very public ordeal. So that one, the fact that it's not even so much that they said it was okay for him to pray. It was just that so much of what they said in there opens the door, I think, to problems with kids feeling compelled to pray, or people who do not practice Christianity praying, and then which is the double-edged sword, having Christians upset that they are praying and and relying on this decision as a means to do so. So I think this is probably not, I don't think this clears anything up for sure.
No, I think it muddies the precedents that now has been set even more. We talked about, overturning precedents of so many years and so on. And I'll go back to the first case that you had talked about as far as the religions in the school. And I think that opens up a door for what I see happening in the state of Iowa with some of the legislature
And
that is being
vouchers
pushed and
things like that.
vouchers and things like that now have opened up the door for that. If it does get passed and then goes to court, that precedence then falls on that particular side of it. And I think the biggest thing that I heard in the last few weeks that I wish I could remember who said it, but it really spoke to me in that, and I'm pretty open that I'm a Catholic, a practicing Catholic here, and I'm in the minority in practicing Catholics when it comes to a lot of these issues. But freedom of religion does not mean that we should kowtow to your particular religion on how we should do things. It just means that you have the right to practice whatever religion you want without persecution. That does not mean that because you are not able to do something in your faith does not turn around and then give the state a mandate to force your religion on top of me.
Yeah, because then you've done what you just described. You're persecuting someone else for not practicing your religion.
Correct.
So you're doing exactly what you sought to have avoided.
That is exactly right.
The irony is not lost on me that a lot of the same people who are doing a lot of hand wringing over quote unquote Sharia law coming to America sure seem to worry about the role of religion in politics.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And I think that comes through most in Dobbs. And if it's okay with you guys, there was two more that I wanted to mention. Then I kind of want to go backwards to Dobbs because I feel like it's important to have the whole context of this session of the court before we dive into Dobbs. So the next one that came the day after the coach praying was Oklahoma v. Castro Huerta. And this one really slid under the radar. I think, It was a case that expanded the power of states over Native American tribes, and the court actually undercut its own ruling from just a couple of years ago. So what they said was the state of Oklahoma now has the right to prosecute a non-native for child neglect, a criminal act of a Native American child, which occurred on the Cherokee Nation reservation. And until this decision, states had lacked jurisdiction over such crimes because reservations are sovereign. They physically exist inside the state, but they do not exist inside the state with respect to their criminal jurisdiction in their territory. This is a huge departure from precedent. And if I were a Native American, I would be very scared right now because this is yet another degradation of their sovereignty and their rights as whatever nation they're in. In this case, it was the Cherokee Nation. And again, I think this flew under the radar because it came in the days after Dobbs and people were still reeling from Dobbs. And to be frank, Native American law and decisions probably aren't as quote unquote sexy as some of the other things. And it just didn't get the amount of coverage that I thought it deserved because it's really scary for those tribes.
I mean, again, I think to me, what struck me the most about that ruling was the idea of government, the quote unquote government tyranny and government overreach. And literally this was a perfect example of endorsing government overreach.
Yeah. Okay. So there's that. And then the very next day we have West Virginia versus the Environmental Protection Agency, which is a decision that it's a major blow to the EPA's power to regulate carbon emissions that cause climate change. So the court said, anytime an agency, whether it's the EPA or another agency, wants to do something big and new, in this case, it was address climate change, that a regulation, meaning the rules they put in place as an agency for us to follow, those rules and regulations are presumptively invalid unless Congress has specifically authorized them to regulate in this sphere. So my fear is, when Congress can't pass a damn thing, even the things that most Americans agree on, they're sure as hell not going to get their shit together enough to grant regulatory authority to an agency that is extremely controversial for something like climate change. So you have this overreach the day before, and then the next day the court says, whoa, government too big, back off. So I get it. In one case, it's state right. I get it. And it's Native American. So pish posh. And the next state, it's something like climate change.
It's states' rights for me, not for thee.
Right.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The climate change ruling, as far as agencies and so on, I find interesting because that almost relates a little bit to the Department of Labor and the vaccine mandate that they tried to pass. And now they have just opened that up. So you're going to tell me that the Department of Labor and OSHA now possibly they don't have the ability to enforce certain rules for worker safety and so on?
Right. So then this is another case. I'm like, well, where's the line then? Because that is how agencies actually act, is they have. And now the argument against that is, well, Congress should just give them the authority. I get it. But like I said, Congress can't tie its own shoe. How is it supposed to tie the shoe of someone else?
Right. Yeah.
So, I mean, okay, this is me I'm being tongue in cheek a little bit here, and I'm oversimplifying things and I'm being slightly dramatic, but I was thinking about this. Okay. So my review of these cases is states can't regulate guns, but they can regulate a woman's body and Native American territories.
Yep.
The Environmental Protection Agency can't regulate the environment. Public tax dollars can be used to pay for religious education, and prayer by public school coaches is a-okay. That's the takeaway from the last couple of weeks. And again, I know I'm oversimplifying, and I know there's people out there that are going to say, come on, you crazy liberal. I understand that it's not that simple, but that's kind of the blow by blow that I felt in the last couple of weeks. And it hurt. It stung.
I think that people need to hear it in simpler terms sometimes, though.
I think so. Like in particular with Dobbs, you're seeing a lot of, well, actually, all this really did was give this to the states.
No, that's bullshit.
But it's completely bullshit because what we've seen almost immediately is what state legislatures are enacting or trying to enact is completely batshit insane and unhealthy. And I mean, there are a billion reasons why women would get an abortion, and all of them, in my opinion, are legitimate. At least certainly none of my business. But for cases of, like ectopic pregnancy, for what we've seen with in Ohio with a 10-year-old rape victim.
Yep.
I think those are certainly extreme examples, but they were these microcosms of what are the unintended consequences of something like this.
Everyone keeps saying that's an extreme example, but let's talk about the law that was at issue in Dobbs. Okay. So the Dobbs came out on June 24th, which ironically is the day after the 50th anniversary of Title IX. And it just was like, you couldn't give us a day to enjoy ourselves. Thank you. Okay. So, but that decision arose from the challenge to a law in Missouri, or was it Mississippi? Either way, one of those two MISS states that outlawed virtually all abortions after 15 weeks, including those for rape and incest. Okay. So those crazy extreme examples were outlawed. Okay.
Right.
So that's what the law was, that the court said, nope, that law no longer, let's kick it back. Okay. So what is the effect of Dobbs? I'm sorry, the court said that law was okay, not kick it out. The court kicked the case out. The court kicked the case out. Okay, so let's talk about what Dobbs actually did. It overrules Roe and Casey, which is the case that reaffirmed Roe in the 90s. And I want to talk for a second about Roe and Casey because Democrats have done a terrible job of messaging what those cases actually say and what they actually mean. Neither of those cases ever granted an unconditional right to abortion. The court never granted women the right to murder babies, as is often stated. Okay, so let's start with Roe. It's decided in 1973. In that case, the court said that generally speaking, criminalizing abortion violates a constitutional right to privacy, which is inherent in the liberty guarantee of the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment. We all know that one. States cannot deprive the right to life, liberty without due process of law. Okay, fine. But the court also said that states do have a compelling interest in the potential life of a fetus. So what that means is there is a point in the pregnancy when states can say, whoa, abortion is no longer okay because the fetus has developed to a point of personhood, or to a point where, they could, if that baby was born today, they would likely be viable. Okay, so they set up a trimester-based framework to balance the right of the woman and the rights of the states. The first trimester, the court said the state cannot regulate abortion because in those first 12 weeks, it's just too early for the state's interest to outweigh a woman's right to abort the baby. The second trimester, states can regulate if the regulation is reasonably related to the health of the pregnant person. And in the third trimester, the trimester where a baby is generally viable, if born, the state can prohibit abortion unless necessary for the health of the pregnant person. So that's when the state's rights actually outweigh the right of the pregnant person. So Roe did not grant that unconditional right of abortion at any point. Then Casey came along in 1992, and it got rid of that trimester-based framework, and it created a more flexible standard, which basically said before viability, which is around 22 to 27 weeks of pregnancy, depending on who you ask, states cannot enact laws that put substantial obstacles in the path of the woman seeking abortion. That's the standard. So there never has been a right to abortion in third trimester. A woman has never been allowed to walk around at 38 weeks pregnant and say, I just don't feel like it anymore. Let's get rid of this baby. That's not what this has been about. It's not what it's ever been about. And I think that's really important because I'm sick of people framing people who are pro-Roe, pro-Casey as baby killers, as murderers. That's not what this is about. So the Dobbs decision overrules Roe and Casey and decades of other abortion cases that relied on those decisions, and said that this law that outlaws abortion after 15 weeks, even for cases of rape and incest, is constitutional. And in doing so, well, I'll pause for a second before I go down the rabbit hole of what Justice Alito's decision is based on. Do you guys have any you want to stop me or before I
Nope.
keep this train on the road?
Keep going.
Okay.
No,
right.
I no.
Okay.
nuts.
So in his decision, Justice Alito's main argument is that abortion is not mentioned in the Constitution at all. So therefore, it cannot be a constitutional right. My problem with this is that so many other things are not mentioned in the Constitution because, spoiler alert, the Constitution was written by a bunch of bleeping white dudes in bleeping the 1780s. You want to know what else is mentioned in the Constitution? Gay marriage, transgender rights, interracial marriage, and, women like myself.
Right.
And hold
Right.
the phones for my Second Amendment friends, because you know what else isn't on the Constitution? AR-15s, because they didn't exist yet. And his ancillary point is that, while we do recognize some fundamental rights that are not expressly mentioned in the Constitution, those rights are so, quote, deeply rooted in our nation's history, end quote, that abortion is not one of those deeply rooted rights. All right, Sammy, here's the issue. You want to know what our nation's history is deeply rooted in? White men making decisions that benefit white men. Our nation's history is deeply rooted in slavery, sexism, racism, etc. So no, abortion probably isn't a deeply rooted right because women didn't even have the right to vote until the 19th Amendment, which wasn't enacted until 1920. So the basis on which his entire decision relies is, for me, a Drake law student who didn't even do particularly well in con law can undercut it in 2 minutes right here.
I mean, to me, and I 3000% agree with you. I think for him, even if I were speaking from a standpoint, I mean, I am a straight white male, but like from someone who wants to discount all of that, I think there are a billion things that Congress has done a very piss poor job of, but very earnest attempt at regulating. Section 230, the internet didn't exist. 17 in the
Right.
the 18th century and in the 19th century, it didn't exist, and we've done a very hard time. Any type of e-commerce, cryptocurrency,
cars. We regulate the hell out of cars.
I mean, if you want to regulate, if you want to talk about just even
oil,
even in the genre that they're in now, casual sex between unmarried people is not in the Constitution either.
So let's talk about that, because
I hate to break it to all you congressmen out there that are,
because I'm sure none of them have ever had
exactly
sexual relations outside of marriage.
Exactly.
So I guess before we get to why this is terrifying and other ways that this decision could affect rights, like you just said, like, sex between partners that aren't married, sex between interracial couples, his last basis for the decision is that the case shouldn't be bound by stare decisis, which is the idea that courts shouldn't overturn prior precedent when unless there's a compelling reason to do so. But my question is, what is the compelling reason to overturn Roe and Casey now? Because nothing has changed in the last 50 years in the sphere of religion or science to warrant this change. The only thing that's changed is the political climate. And he compared this case to Brown v. Board of Education, which you guys probably know. I'm sure our listeners know that that's the case that said the separate but equal doctrine is unconstitutional. And that case did overrule precedent. The difference between Brown and this case is that Brown granted rights to people of color, the right to equal access to education. Here, we're taking away a constitutional right for half the population. And if it's not the first time, it's one of the first times in history that the court has taken away a right in reversing opinion instead of granting it. And I know we're getting close to a break, so I'll finish my thought about this by just saying, in effect, the court concluded that abortion is not a fundamental right under the Constitution. Because it's not a constitutional right, state laws are now going to be reviewed with the most lenient standard of review. You'll hear this in the news. It's called rational basis scrutiny, which means that laws survive constitutional muster so long as there's a, quote, rational basis on which the legislature think that the law would serve their state interests. So protecting the life of the unborn, state interest, law is good to go. So I think that's what we're about to see come, and we can talk about more about that after the break if you guys want.
Yeah, no, I would
sure.
love to. As Steph said, we are going to take a break. I do have questions about that, the difference between apparently protecting the life of the unborn, protecting the life of the born, as well as I think some other unintended consequences when you give a nod back to historical precedents, thinking particularly as a state of Minnesota where gay marriage is legal, but there are still technically anti-sodomy laws on the books, and understanding what maybe some other ripple effects might be coming here, that for all the people who say, oh, don't worry about it, maybe
We're
just-
worried, and we'll tell
yeah,
you why you should be too.
exactly. So
Right.
we'll go ahead and talk about that. Chris, anything before we hit this break?
Yeah, I just when we come back as well, I would like to ask Stephanie why the Democrats shouldn't get a pass on this either, and I'll give a couple of examples as well, because I think they're just as complicit in these decisions.
Yeah, totally agree.
Excellent. Well, with that very
Uplifting and happy.
non-contentious,
We'll get to some fun stuff at some
with
point.
some non-contentious notes there, we will go ahead and take a word from our sponsors.
The dog days of summer are upon us, and the weekend lineup of fun events at Revelton Distilling Company are really heating up. So if you want something fun to do on Saturday evenings, then look no further than What's Brewing at Revelton at 1400 West Clay Street in Osceola, Iowa. Starting July 9th, Jesse and the Medicine Men are playing with Faux Wheels and Sushi Truck providing the food. Followed by July 16th, Sean Sullivan plays. July 23rd, Griffiths and Lindgren take the stage with Culinary Nomad Food Truck. And finally, wrapping up the month of July, on the 30th, come listen to Jake Schroep and have some of Chad's Pizza Food Truck. Can't make it to the tasting room? No problem. Check out their Instagram at ReveltonDC for recipes and tutorials on how to make their amazing spirits at home.
And we are back once again. This is Old Man Strength, a podcast of Three Beards Media. Please go ahead and check out our sponsors. We are very excited that they are helping us bring this content to you. Once again, we are joined by Stephanie Copley. Steph, right before the break, we were talking about maybe some unintended consequences of some of these decisions, and maybe the ripple effect that might come about.
Yeah. So I, over the weekend, was on a run and I just could not stop thinking about this stuff. So I got done with my run and I sat down and I started typing, and I messaged Chris, like my fingers were going faster than I couldn't keep up because so much of this was just rolling. So I have quite the list of why you should be scared. No big deal. But the first one is what you guys mentioned, that it's scary for other rights. The ripple effect could impact other rights that we have just assumed are well established. Those include the right to contraception, the right of, same-sex relation, the rights of same-sex couples and same-sex relationships, interracial marriage even. And I know that sounds crazy, but let's talk about this, because there's several decisions that rely on the same framework that the Roe and Casey decisions relied on, which has since been overturned. And so now you have to wonder, if we're relying on that same framework that no longer is valid, what if someone challenges these other decisions that are based on that same framework? And one of those is the Griswold case, where the court held that states cannot limit access to contraception to non-married couples and married couples as well. And the issue was that marital privacy became a fundamental right under the 14th Amendment. So it becomes this privacy thing that we continue to hear about, that Roe and Casey were partially based on. Then you have Lawrence, which the court held that states cannot criminalize consensual sex between partners of the same sex because there's a right to sexual privacy under the 14th Amendment. Then we have Obergefell, which was the case that the court ruled that states cannot make gay marriage illegal because, again, there's a privacy. That was partially due process and equal protection under the 14th Amendment. But again, the 14th Amendment is there. And these all come from the same fabric of the 14th Amendment and the right to privacy over personal life decisions. And again, I'll say it, it's the 14th Amendment. No state can deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without the due process of law. That's what we keep talking about. Now, the people, the Justices Kavanaugh and Alito said, you know what, these decisions are well established. Nothing in this decision, the Dobbs decision, is meant to suggest that those decisions are at risk. But Justice Thomas said, oh, wait a second. These decisions are all very much in doubt. And that is terrifying to me, because the very next day you have all of these conservative groups calling for groups to challenge the right to gay marriage, to challenge all of these rights that we assumed were well established. And what I think is so funny is that Justice Thomas in his concurrence mentions the Griswold case, the Lawrence case, and the Obergefell case, but he doesn't mention Loving, which is the case about interracial marriage. And that's interesting, because if you don't know yet, Justice Thomas is in an interracial marriage. So that decision, that I guess his words, not the decision as a whole, but that part of it was very scary to me, because you have these conservative justices saying, nope, those rights are not impacted. But the Thomas is saying, yes, they are. And frankly, at this point, I don't believe anything those conservative justices are saying. If the right case comes up, I think they could say, to hell with it. Let's just keep this train rolling.
Well, and that's why I said that I thought that Justice Thomas in his decisions was giving a very loud wink and a nod, right? I mean, you mentioned Loving
like
versus,
the dog whistle,
right?
Yes.
Oh, it absolutely. It's not even. It's a siren at this point, right?
You know what? You're probably right.
But I mean, you mentioned Loving versus Virginia, which he did very conveniently overlook.
That one out.
But I mean, if you look at anything going on with the January 6th committee and his wife. Ginny Thomas, who very much has been very clearly documented. This is not hearsay by any means. She very clearly documented that her action towards trying to delegitimize the election, his inability to recuse himself, even just passively, he's signaling harder than I think he had. Again, so he's his confirmation was 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Right. And I think he's signaling harder than he ever has in his entire time on the bench. Like it's basically a now's the time is what I've gotten from his decision.
That's kind of what I had thought as well. His confirmation was extremely contentious.
Yeah, it was very tumultuous.
It's the first one that I remember vividly being overtly political.
Right.
Just based off of my memories and things like that. And I think that I don't want to say has bided his time and waited, but I think that he sees an opportunity now with those new judges that are a lifetime appointment, that it's free reign to go ahead and do what he has been waiting to do.
I mean, sexual harassment literally as a term entered the lexicon.
Right.
Yeah.
During his confirmation.
Right. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And so that justice gets confirmed. And I mean, I just can't. Yeah, it's hard for me to think about the course of history since then. But so now you've got this man deciding these cases that we have relied on for 50 years. We're talking generations of women. Well, not just women. We were talking generations of Americans who have relied on this being the law. My mom came of age under Roe. It's been the law my entire life. And now it's not the law for my daughters.
Right.
And to suddenly pull out the rug from this after years of constitutional challenges, years of people bringing the same type of case to the court, that's terrifying. Overnight, my right was gone. And like I said before, nothing has changed in those 50 years except the extremism of conservatives and the comfortability with which they have come to the forefront. And I think Justice Thomas is an example of that.
Well, that will lead me into the little tease question that I had before the break. And I will say that I brought this up on Twitter. And again, I know bringing up an intelligent conversation on Twitter is probably not the best idea, but I really do believe, and tell me if I'm wrong. Tim, that's never been a problem for you. So,
I'll tell you. It's never
right?
been a
I know.
problem for me either.
The Democrats at some point in the last 50 years have had enough majority.
Oh
Well,
my
let's
God.
back up. I don't know that I've ever heard the term, Tim's going to hammer me for this, the word codify before Roe v. Wade, because now they're talking about, they need to now codify it and make it federal law and so on. Okay, well, let me ask you a question. Steph, to your point, you just said, there's been challenge after challenge after challenge to this law. Why has there not been, are you telling me that there has not been a big enough majority by the Democrats at any point in the last 50 years that they could not have codified that as law?
No, I have absolutely no explanation for that. I cannot explain it to you. It is one of the most frustrating intellectual exercises of my entire life. Well, I have no answer.
I will tell you what I think the answer is. And it's for the same reason that at the times that the Republicans had a majority that they could have codified it as not law, is because what are they going to run on then? And what are they going to run their campaigns on if they can't put people's fears into the voting booth? That's why.
I think that's a fair point. I think for me, one big thing that it always sticks out to me is Republicans are very quick to turn on their own when someone steps outside of the platform. We are all familiar with the term rhino, Republican in name only, right?
Right.
But the Democrats have had so many dinos, so many Democrats in name only, and they're fucking dinosaurs.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
if you look at President Biden's history as a legislator, his stance on police reform, or Kamala Harris's stance on police. Kamala Harris is a cop. And if you look at President Biden's stance on abortion advocacy throughout the years, he's a pretty damn conservative Democrat and has been for years. And I think I think the Democrats have been running on this idea of bipartisanship forever. And,
that is it. Because Democrats play this moral high ground game where they say, we are going to clutch our pearls and play by the rules. Whereas I'm not suggesting Republicans are cheaters, whatever, but they don't play by the same rules. They get down and dirty. They go after it. And I'm not even criticizing that. They have been wildly successful in doing that. And meanwhile,
they don't care about making deals.
No. And meanwhile, Democrats are like, well, we want to do this the right way. There is no more time for a right way. You passed on the right way 40 years ago. This is not just limited to abortion. This is the same with gun control. This is the same with pretty much any social issue. And it's wildly frustrating.
I had the same argument when it came to the gun control after Uvalde. Was my same argument. I said, you're telling me that in the last X number of years since Columbine, let's take Columbine for example, that the Democrats
35 years ago
have not had enough power in Congress to pass a gun ban. That's what you're telling me. One of two things. And I kept getting, well, they can't right now because of Manson and so on. I said, so you're telling me that one of two things is going on. Either the Republicans are so much smarter at this game that they've been able to outsmart the Democrats for 35 years with a filibuster, or the Democrats just don't know what the hell they're doing. And I kind of think I kind of think it's truthful on both ends. And
I grew up in a small town, and I think I probably leaned conservative for a long time. And then I went to college and things changed, and I'm definitely
got indoctrinated.
Yes, that's right. In those damn liberal colleges. That's right. That's me. I'm the perfect poster child for that. But, at this point, I don't feel like I identify with a Democrat because I am Democrat in terms of where I stand on social issues, yes, but I want to do something about it. I don't want to be someone who just stands up there and says, it's time to change. and then nothing ever happens. And I'm so frustrated. And I know I'm not alone. And people keep saying, well, maybe this will rally the base to go vote. I have been voting. If one more person tells me to go vote, I'm going to punch him in the face.
Yeah,
This is not. Go ahead.
no,
Let's
no.
cancel that voting ad we had running next to it.
I was
guys-
gonna say. I think one of the biggest successes that conservatives have had in this country for a long time was the framing of right versus left, and the idea that Democrats are left, because in most developed nations around the world, this Democrat Party would be a left center, or like a right center right party. They would not be left. They're not anywhere close to left. But you get all these people believing that Democrats are these leftists and these Marxists and these communists and these socialists, which, by the way, are very different political ideologies.
Right.
But you've convinced all these people that if you're not conservative, you're Hitler and Stalin and Mao and everything else.
Yeah.
And again, you go to Denmark, and our Democrat Party would be pretty damn conservative. And so there's also been this huge, like, I don't care if you're a Bernie bro or whatever, but what you found is even Bernie Sanders, who's pretty conservative by a European standpoint, but is considered way liberal. And so now what that's done is it's fractured this other party that isn't even really diametrically opposed as much as
No.
it's been framed.
And here's the frustrating part is people will listen to this and think I'm one of those like liberal snowflakes. And that cannot be farther from the truth. I guarantee you, I fall within that giant pool of people in the middle. But no one ever
80%.
Yes. But you've got these people on both ends who are so loud and frankly powerful, that nothing that the vast majority of Americans want, the reasonable people, the reasonable solutions, ever get done. And this is why this issue in particular, the abortion issue, getting sent back to the states really scares me, because there are a million things that belong to the states. There just are. There are certain things that the federal government should not touch. Schools, because what a school is in New York City is not the same as what a school is in Iowa. Like there are just certain logical issues and rights that belong to the states to decide, but not when it comes to fundamental human rights, because history has shown us that putting human rights in the hands of the states tends to not go very well. Like we talked about slavery being the obvious example, segregation, more recently, gay rights, trans rights, and state leadership changes at such a faster pace. What is and isn't legal with abortion could change depending on your majority. It could swing back and forth based on the extremism of that majority. And that goes both ways. And that's why it scares me that that very loud minority on both sides tends to be in charge in the states. And that's why coming to the states for something as important like abortion is scary to me.
I mean, I think there's two thoughts that you made me think of. Is first of all, the idea of screaming states' rights. I mean, it's the rallying cry of the Civil War, and I always have to ask, states' rights to do what?
Right.
Like again, it comes down to fundamental human rights.
Right.
The other thing is, like you said, that the powerful are making more decisions. If you look at the vast majority, this has been done in poll after poll after poll of NRA members.
Yeah.
The majority of NRA members are in favor of common sense gun regulation. The majority of NRA members are, but the NRA lobby does not even advocate for they don't even advocate for, it doesn't matter what the general Americans want. They don't even advocate for what their own members want.
Yeah.
But then you've got some douchebag like Ted Cruz wrapping bacon around a gun and pretending like this is some sort of freedom. While meanwhile his own kid doesn't want to hug him. Like literally the guy is completely clueless, but he speaks to these people that well, he's just speaking for the common. No, he's not speaking for the common man.
No.
Ted
right,
Cruz hasn't been around a common man, and I don't know when.
I mean, Mitch McConnell the other day said that the reason why there's a worker shortage is because people are flush with cash from
Saw that. I was
from,
like,
from stimulus
bro.
payments. I'm like, dude, you could have given me 10 times the stimulus payment you gave me, and I would still feel poor as shit. Like, I don't
Yeah.
understand what you think that means. Meanwhile, he is literally the 7th richest member of Congress.
Yeah.
Like, that dude made more money in the 5 minutes it took for him to make that statement than anyone has ever gotten in a stimulus payment
technically
ever.
he's right, because he's flush with cash, and I can't remember the last time he has done any work.
You guys start this. So this segment, since the break, you asked me, you know, what are the ripple effects and why is it scary? So I'll just give you the last one on my bullet point. And it's that we are codifying Christianity in this decision. And what I mean by that is this all centers around, well, not all, but a large part of these decisions center around, when does human life begin? Doctors and science don't agree on this issue. Not all religions agree on this issue, that life begins at conception. In fact, Jewish law, they believe under Jewish law, the fetus is not viewed as separate from the parent's body until the baby's first breath. So it doesn't begin until the baby's life. So who believes that life begins at conception? Christians. And if this is such a religious issue, by saying, I don't have a right to an abortion, you're saying, I need to live by your Christian ideals. And I'm very uncomfortable with that. And I will say, I'm uncomfortable with that as a Christian. I identify as a Christian. And I'm a Christian, but I don't believe you have to be. I don't believe my neighbor has to be. If you are a Christian and you don't believe abortion is biblical, don't get one. It's that simple. And frankly, if you're a Christian, it shouldn't matter to you what the law says that I can do, because my whole thing about this is, if you're every day trying to live and walk as Jesus lived and walked, you shouldn't care what the law says. You should be living by Jesus's example and his beliefs and how he portrays himself. You should be someone that people feel safe coming to. You shouldn't need a law to force people into what you believe. And if you do, you're doing it wrong, because by celebrating the removal of a right of half the population, you're alienating half the population and the men who support that half. You are not drawing people into Christ's love. You are alienating them. And the only people you're drawing to your Christian base is the extremists. You are rallying your base. And I'm not a biblical scholar, just as I'm not a constitutional law scholar, but I don't think that's what Jesus Christ intended. And it scares me that we're codifying Christianity, because again, this goes back to the decisions about if it was a Hindu coach praying at midfield, I don't think the court would have decided the same way.
So we're going to get to a sponsored question here in a second, but it did bring up something that I did want to ask you, because it is something that has been proposed that I find certainly intriguing, because you mentioned that this does fall at odds with other religions. And I think particularly when it comes to Judaism, as you had mentioned, could there potentially be a First Amendment challenge to this decision?
So I wondered about that, but First Amendment is tricky. It's not, people say you can't, that's my First Amendment right. Well, I don't think the vast majority of people understand what First Amendment means, first of all. But I don't know is the answer to that. I wondered the same thing when I started reading about Judaism and what Jewish law says. And because if you are preventing a Jewish person but the argument would be, well, they don't have a religious right to seek the abortion, so I don't know what the answer is. I'd have to think that one through.
But do they? Because the Talmud doesn't just allow it, it actually commands it.
Supports it as healthcare.
Yes. Yeah. It actually says this is what you should do. So at that point, it's not about allowing, it's literally about following a tenets of your religion.
Yeah, that's a great point. I hadn't thought about it that way. You're absolutely right.
And so that to me is the one thing I've wondered, because I fully anticipate that could be something that would be a potential challenge.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
That's interesting. I had not thought of that.
Well done, Tim. We just solved one of the problems.
Don't give him a compliment. Don't do that.
I was trying to lighten the mood for
I
your
gave
sponsor
you-
question, okay? I want your
I
sponsor
gave
to
you
come
rules.
back.
I gave you rules, Stephanie, and one of them was not to praise Tim. Such a
Just
bad
want you
idea.
guys
It's
to
like
get paid.
it's like feeding the dog at the table. He just keeps coming back.
No, it's all right. I am a constitutional law scholar, as per Wikipedia.
Yeah.
No, we do want to go ahead and get into our sponsored question brought to you by Kyle Lehman and Wintrust Mortgage. Very grateful to bring Kyle and the team at Wintrust Mortgage on as a partner of Three Beards Media and this podcast, Old Man Strength. So with that, Chris, I will let you go ahead and ask this question.
Are you in the market for a new house and unsure of the mortgage process? Want to know that you have someone looking out for you? Kyle Lehman from Wintrust Mortgage is a down-to-earth, knowledgeable lender who can be there for you in your corner. He can work with you in any of the 50 states and is just what you need to expand your home search. Kyle will work with you through the entire process with little to no work from you. Take the worry of the mortgage process out of the equation so that you can focus on looking for your dream home. Contact Kyle at www.wintrust.com/Kyle-Lehman or call him at 515-473-0546.
All right. Well, there you go. You know, earlier in the podcast, you talked about being a mom to two young girls.
Yes.
And I'm sure you've thought about, you know, how you're going to frame certain things to them as they grow up and tell them. But I'm curious now with 2022, Stephanie, what would you go back 10 years and tell Stephanie from the version of 2012?
Oh, that was the year I graduated law school. So that was a very pivotal year for me because I wasn't sure I wanted to be a lawyer. And I was like, well, I have this law degree. What the hell am I going to do now?
So you're a typical liberal who just racked up a bunch of debt and didn't know what you wanted to do. And now you just
Well,
wait for
frankly,
that big
it was the
green
economy's
check, right?
fault because I graduated from college and wanted to go into sports journalism and the economy crashed. And I was like, well, I don't know if newspapers are going to exist, so I better do something else.
But now that she's flush with all the stimulus cash.
Yes, this is really coming full circle. I think I would tell myself to not do the quote unquote right thing, and to instead follow my passions and dreams more. Because I was in very much of a, this is a scary economy. Lawyers are always going to exist. I should just go to law school. It's the safe and right thing to do. And then I joined a firm, which they were very wonderful to me. But it definitely wasn't my passion in life. And then I ended up doing workers' compensation law for 10 years, which shockingly wasn't my passion in life. I liked it. It was a good job, but it wasn't my passion. And it wasn't until 2019 when Chris Williams gave me and Elisa the opportunity to do the TitleIX podcast that I finally felt like, okay, I'm doing the thing that I originally set out to do and do something in sports media. And, you know, that was 7 years later that I finally got around to it just by the grace of Chris. So I think if I could go back 10 years ago, I would tell baby lawyer me, you have some time to figure out what you want to do, take some risks, and trust yourself.
Great answer.
Thanks.
It is a great answer.
I've thought about it a lot, if you can't tell.
I also just like the idea of baby lawyer. I think that's a,
Right?
that's a
I know.
Oh, God.
Print the t-shirt.
coming this fall to NBC, baby
Yeah.
lawyer.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned your sports passions. Let's hit a little bit on Title IX. Tell me what was that like to start that, and just give us a little background on that.
Sure. So Elisa Woods and I co-host the Title IX podcast, and the Title IX title is tongue in cheek. We don't actually talk about Title IX legislation. We just think it's funny because Title IX is, of course, the legislation that gave women the equal seat at the table when it came to collegiate athletics. And we felt like that was our opportunity to have the equal seat at the table of the guys at Cyclone Fanatics. So we talk about everything sports related. We talk primarily about the Cyclones, but we try our best to give special attention and special shout outs to the female athletes, both at the collegiate level and the professional level. And we do it every other week, every other Monday we try. And it's funny because when we first met, it was the summer of 2019. Elisa and I had never met each other before. Chris just had met her through various sponsorships, and I'd known Chris since college. And he was like, I think you two might hit it off. And we did. We had lunch, and I felt like I had known her for my entire life. And I know we got lucky because of that chemistry that we were able to hit it off right away. But she's become such an important person to me because of the way that this has been such an important creative outlet for me. And it's just been a lot of fun. She's part of my family now, and we see the world in a lot of similar ways, but we see it differently enough that we can kind of go back and forth and challenge each other and challenge each other's worldviews. So it's been nothing but a blessing and nothing but a joy to do.
Sounds familiar, doesn't it, Tim?
It does, absolutely.
It does a little bit.
Chris and I did not know each other at all. We met for the first time 4 months ago, something like that.
No,
but
we've been doing this podcast for 2 years.
I was going to say, what?
yeah, absolutely. We
Did you see my face?
I was like, what is he talking about?
Yeah, we had literally never met in person. We've been doing this thing for
Oh,
like
I'm
2
sorry.
years and never
Yes,
Oh.
met in person. Yeah,
I see what
but
you
we had
mean.
been.
I thought
we
you were
hadn't
being
met each
funny.
other before.
Oh no, we've been doing this whole thing blindfolded.
I was like, that math doesn't check. I'm not good at math, but
the thing that I also appreciate about the Title IX podcast is that it's also something that a whole lot of grumpy old men don't understand, but think they do and get to use as an excuse to complain.
Right.
Yep, that's also true. It's been great. And, people always ask, do you get, is most of your feedback positive, or do you have some bad eggs? And yeah, there's a couple where people like, God, that was just unnecessary. But 99% of the feedback we get is supportive and positive. And I'm just so thankful that people tune in every couple of weeks and that it's given me a platform to talk about some stuff that's very important to me, not political, but very important to me nonetheless. So I've been very grateful for the chance.
Well, that's fantastic. And
Yeah.
and I'm very humbled that you came on and got a chance to speak about some of those things that maybe aren't necessarily fitting for your podcast.
Right. And it's weird. I mentioned I was an administrative law judge for workers' compensation. So that means I had to be impartial and couldn't really speak publicly about my political views. And before that, I worked for the Attorney General's office and felt pretty strongly that I shouldn't speak really politically. And so for a lot of years, let me think back, probably 6 years, I just never publicly spoke about the way I viewed certain issues. And that was hard because I am a fiery human. I am an opinionated person. But after things started happening in with the Black Lives Movement and things like that, I just felt like, I can't really bite my tongue anymore. There becomes a point when if you have a platform, you need to say what you stand for, or otherwise, what's the point of the platform? And so that's kind of why I'm here. But yeah, it's taking a step out of my comfort box, but that's what I said I would say to myself in 2012. So it's time to say it today, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
No,
Sorry.
go ahead, please.
Can we create a new segment on this podcast right now?
Please.
Sure. We don't know what we're doing here anyways. We'll take any kind
Can
of
we
advice
call
from
it
you.
the shut the F up segment? Because there's a couple of things about this issue where I just want to say shut the F up. And I feel like I need to say them while I have this chance. Is that okay with you guys?
Please,
Sure.
Please.
We're looking for a sponsor for this shut the F up.
Hey, Chris, shut the F up and let her talk.
All right. I've been hearing a few arguments that I just want to say stop about. Okay. And one of those is masks, because I hear a lot of conservatives saying, but you wanted to control my body when it came to masks. And I just need to say, those are not the same thing. In those cases, I was asking you to wear a piece of cloth over your nose for a couple of minutes. That is not comparable to forcing a pregnancy on someone. Pregnancy is hard. I had 2 completely normal, healthy pregnancies, and it was some of the hardest physical experiences of my life, not only during the pregnancy, but the aftermath. You guys, it destroys your body. I'm telling you. And then on top of that, mask wearing is to benefit the community at large, because if you weren't wearing a mask, you're putting me in danger. And then I'm in turn putting my kids in danger, who are putting their friends at daycare and school in danger, and so on. Me being pregnant or not pregnant does not affect you. It has nothing to do with your health or safety. So it's not the same thing, and stop trying to use it. I can't stand it.
I didn't even argue that your pregnancy does affect the community at large when we consider how many people are on welfare and all of the public assistance.
Yeah, I wasn't even going to go there, but you went there.
Yeah.
And then go ahead.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
No, I was going to say
shut the F up.
Yeah, you're right.
This is my segment, guys.
Go.
Just the individual autonomy part of it. If you don't want an abortion, don't get one. Just like if you don't believe in gay marriage, don't go to a gay wedding or don't marry someone who's gay. It just doesn't affect you in those ways. And then the last one is the argument where people say, if you don't like it in your state, just move. Do you realize how privileged that sounds? And not you two, but people who say that. I'm fine. Like, I have a stable job. I have stable income. I have stable daycare, but my entire life is here. My kids' lives are here. It would be my parents' lives, my sister's life. It would be next to impossible for me to just get up and move. And I'm in a very comfortable position. To suggest to someone who is not in a comfortable financial position, who in a lot of those cases, people seeking abortions are not in a comfortable financial situation, telling them to just move is so privileged and so awful. And I can't stomach it anymore.
I saw some talking head, like some legitimate blue checkmark talking head on Twitter the other day saying that the 10-year-old in Ohio should just move.
Yeah.
That's like saying just vote to that girl who got shot on the 4th of July. We can't say stuff like that anymore.
I know. It's so frustrating about how I want the government out of my life, but in yours. Again, it's freedom for me and not for thee.
Yeah.
Like that's literally what it is. That's what it comes down to.
And the last thing I'll say, and this is not the part of the shut the up segment, but
you can swear, it's fine.
Yeah, we swear all the time.
Okay, sorry.
One time you can say the F word, Stephanie. Go ahead.
I can't do it.
I'll give you an F word pass. It's fine.
So in Iowa, where we stand today, is that the governor had asked the Iowa Supreme Court to take a look at the legislation that was put in place, but was they were sued for it. It was the legislation put in place in 2018 that banned abortions after 6 weeks of pregnancy, and that was one of the strictest at the time. But that got challenged, and there was an injunction put in place, meaning it just stopped for the time being. And the governor has asked the Supreme Court to review that. And that's interesting because just days before the United States Supreme Court ruled in Dobbs, the Iowa Supreme Court held that the abortion is not a constitutional right under the Iowa Constitution. And why that's significant is that state constitutions can grant more rights to its citizens than the federal constitution, but they can't be more restrictive. So in other words, now Iowa could have said abortion is a constitutional right, and that would have been okay. But now they've said it's not a constitutional right, which in effect will make legislation that makes abortion illegal. It will make that legislation more likely to be constitutional. So I assume if we don't get something that the court messes with soon, we'll get legislation soon that will be in line with what's been passed in years prior. So that's where we are in Iowa.
Well, so what you need to do in Iowa is what we have up here in Minnesota. You need to get Republican legislators that don't even read the bill to the point where they passed THC edibles and didn't even realize that they did it. And they complained that it was in the fine print. And you're like, the language of the bill is not called fine print,
and
sir.
You literally have one job to make laws. You should probably read the laws.
Just read. Just
read it.
The only state in the country where we have passed marijuana legalization by accident.
Yeah, it's the most Minnesota nice thing ever. We're gonna be passively aggressive nice.
It is because usually what that means is people that are just confused and angry.
Yeah.
Well, Steph,
all right, I'm done now. That's all. That's everything.
No, we appreciate what you've shared. If you ever want to come back, if there's ever anything that is grinding your gears that
you're gonna regret saying that.
That's right.
Oh no, trust me. Chris and I have crossed a bridge a long time ago where trolls are going to accuse us of being any number of things.
Yeah, I'm ready for that. Bring it on.
No, we've literally been accused of being one-sided for being Iowa State grad, so I don't know what the hell that even means.
I don't either.
But yeah,
Go Cyclones. That's what that means.
That's right.
we literally had a police officer on right after George Floyd, which happened like a mile from my front steps,
Yeah.
and I was anti-cop, and we literally had a police officer. So anyway,
yeah. And to be fair, you guys had me on. That's everything I just spewed out of my heart was my view. You know, that's not necessarily your guys's or whatever.
Well, but I think that we pride ourselves though on being fair about the issues and being, you know what I mean? I mean, I am probably more right leaning on certain aspects, not when it comes to social issues.
Yeah.
But I have learned a long time ago, there's no way anybody allows you to be in the middle because you get hammered by both sides. And
it's really heartbreaking.
And it's really, it's really kind of sad. I mean, I'm perfectly okay with calling out the hypocrisy of one side and then applying it to the other side when I see it. And the amount of people that do not like that, left and right, is astounding.
And this is why we'll never get representation of the people in the middle, because the people in the middle just are like, I'm not going to take it because I'm bashing my head against the wall from the criticism of both those extremist sides. So yeah, anyway, on that really super lighthearted, happy note, thanks for having me.
No, I was just going to say, you know, Chris says that he tends to lean more right, whereas I tend to lean more correct. So, you know, it's fine.
Yeah. Man, it took you a long time to get a shot in tonight. You must be.
I was blabbering the whole time.
I was trying to be polite. We had whatever.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, thank you guys for real. This has been cathartic and therapeutic for me, and I appreciate you giving me a platform to say what's on my heart and mind. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you for coming on, Steph.
Yeah,
my pleasure.
Any last thing you want to plug?
No, just listen to the TitleIX podcast. Follow us on Twitter. We try to have some fun. So check us out there.
They can find you on Twitter
at Steph Copley or at the TitleIX Pod, and Elisa Woods is at Elisa WHO.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, Stephanie Copley, we appreciate you joining us on Old Man Strength, a podcast once again of Three Beards Media. Please go ahead and check out threebeardsmedia.com.
Yeah.
We have some exciting things in the work, maybe a new podcast or two that is developing as we add to the stable of what is in the entire group that we pretend like we're some sort of media conglomerate here.
Dun, dun, dun.
Howard Stern should probably keep an eye out. We're gunning for Howard Stern. Right.
You guys are my competiters now. Why the hell am I here?
No,
yeah. You go ahead and watch out, Steph. We're coming for you.
Right. Does that mean you're not coming to our launch party then in September, Steph? Is that what that means?
Just kidding. I support you guys. I think what you do is great.
Excellent. Well, thank you. Chris, is there any other kind of housekeeping we need to cover? You mentioned the launch party. Is there anything else you want to let our listeners know about what we at Old Man Strength or Three Beards Media at large have going on?
No, like you said, we got a couple new pods kind of in the works and some exciting announcements coming up. But we are going to have an official Three Beards Media launch party with our sponsor, Revelton Distilling Company, September 2nd. So it'll be the Friday night before the home opener of the Iowa State game.
That's amazing.
So we're going, Aaron's flying in from Bitter Units. He'll be here. And then we're going to tailgate and then watch Cyclones kick some ass that Sunday. And I'm ready to go. I'm ready to watch some 100-deckers run around and throw the ball. And I'm pumped. So
yeah, please go visit Revelton Distilling at 1400 West Clay Street in Osceola, Iowa. Make sure that you are giving them a lot of love because they've been showing us a lot of love, and we very much appreciate that.
Yeah, and thank you to Kyle Lehman for hopping on with us too, and Wintrust Mortgage for the sponsored question. And we're ready to go.
Absolutely. Well, once again, you guys have been listening to Old Man Strength. I am Tim Johnson, joined by Chris Shipley. We appreciate you guys very much, and we will see you guys next time.